Can we start?
Yes, of course. Thank you for joining us today. We are pleased to present Latin America region and our interesting topic, intersectionality between LGBT plus and LATAM community. My name is Silvana Del Vecchio. I work in JPMorgan in Learning and Development and lead LATAM Pride PR team. Please refer to me as she, her, hers. Today, I have the honor to moderate this wonderful panel with my colleagues from JPMorgan. Let me introduce Elizabeth Omanguilla.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Eli has been with us in the firm for 9 years. She's currently in the Human Resources Department. Her current function is in recruiting. She's located in North America, and we refer with the she, her, hers pronouns. Then we have Felipe. Hey, Felipe.
Hi, how are you guys? Thanks for coming.
Felipe is an operation manager for one of our large line of business. He's located in Brazil, and we refer with he, his, him. And then we have Antonio. Antonio, say hello.
Hola, hola.
Antonio Gredaño, he is under finance organization. His current function is a controller. He's located in Mexico, and we refer with he, his, him pronouns. Today in our panel, we will talk about intersectionality between being LGBT and Latin America community. Our region presents variances between country to country, and we will review this and listen to testimonials from those who live in Latin America and others who migrated. So if we have to define intersectionality, we will say that intersectionality refers to the interconnected nature of the social categorizations, such as nationality, class, or gender, as they apply to individuals or groups, regardless of creating overlapping and interdependent system of discrimination or disadvantage. For example, a woman in finance industry is a minority. And if in addition to be a woman, you are Black, there are less cases of Black women in this industry. In other words, you represent a subgroup inside of a minority. Other example, let's suppose that I have a disability, which positions me as a minority. But if in addition, I was born and raised in India and I live in LATAM, it will be a minority group, and the disability and ethnicity are interconnected in creating further disadvantages to me. Intersectionality appears across everyone on a general scale, not just LGBT people. We are all a sum of complex mix of skills, interests, experience, and background. So the LGBT experience varies based on in the region, the socioeconomic status, the background, and even within Latin America. Each country and each city has different rights. Today, we will review what is the experience of our panelists as are part of LGBT spectrum, and they come from Latin America countries. As you see in our presentation, we will talk about 4 countries from Latin America, and we are going to start with the reality in Mexico. So, Antonio, I think that you are the best for starting with Mexico to cover this relevant information from your country.
Thank you so much, Silvana. So hi, I'm Antonio. I'm a proud queer drag queen, gay man born and raised in Mexico. And I will talk about the reality that LGBT community is facing in Mexico. One fact is that Mexico has been a mature country, so the fight for rights hasn't been easy. Nowadays, only 18 out of 32 states have approved the same-sex marriage. And this is just a little bit more than half of the states in Mexico. And also until 2018, we had over 3,000 same-sex marriages. That's the latest data that we have. And if this has been a hard journey for the LGBT rights, the journey for the gender identity law has been even harder. By law here in Mexico, you can change your identity, your gender, and your names only if you are over age, which is 18 years old. And if you're part of the youth, trans youth, you can only do it if you are 12 and if you live in Mexico City. But this process is really, really hard. So these are some stuff that has happened here in Mexico. And as you know, the trans reality is even harder. But thanks to LGBT activists, this September, I mean like the past month, the government announced the beginning of the construction for a clinic specialized in trans people. Before this, we only had a clinic specialized in HIV, and everyone who were or assigned as trans people, they went there. So now, thanks to these activists, now we're gonna have this this clinic. This is something good. But the reality is that Mexico is the second country in Latin America that has trans murders. Until April 30, this April 30 of 2020, we had 26 murders from LGBT community because they were part of this community. I mean, if they weren't LGBT, they wouldn't be murdered. So we still have a lot of work to do. Because the latest murder that we had in Mexico was a student, 18-year-old student, Jonathan Santos, and he was murdered in Jalisco just because he was gay. So that's the one hard thing that we're living in Mexico. But in the other hand, we also have some good news. In 1979, we had our first gay parade in Mexico City, and it started as many countries as a march. Through the years, now this is a march, but also it's a celebration of freedom, a celebration of who we are, of that we can be who we really are. Until 2015, this Pride Parade was covered only by companies like, club companies, nightclub companies. But in 2016, JPMorgan, next to other companies, we created this group of companies called Pride Connection. And in this group of companies, we share better practices. So as a group, we decided in 2016 that we needed to march as everybody around the globe. So for Mexico, 2016 was a really good year because it was the first time that many companies marched next to people. So it was our first parade. And in 2019, we also marched with these companies. Pride Connection started with only 20 companies. Now we are 86 companies. So the last parade, we were over 8,000 people, only from companies, friends, family, co-workers. And this is something that is really good, because now we have all the sides of the coin for the LGBT community. We have this parade, which is a celebration. We have the NGOs that march for rights, and we have the companies that stand with us. So that's the journey that we have been in Mexico.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Antonio. Before continue, I will move to Argentina's situation, but before continue, let me tell to the audience that we can listen your question or read your question through the polls that you have in Padlor. So as soon as we continue with the presentations of the different country or the testimonial from our panelists, feel free to write down the questions, and we will review shortly and try to answer in this moment. As I told you, I will continue with Argentina, and I will be back to 1933. When Argentina returned to democracy, and only 1 year later, in 1984, Carlos Jauregui, an LGBT rights activist, founded Argentina Homosexual Community, that is called CHAM, an important group that provides legal assistance campaigns for HBI and stands against LGBT discrimination. But it was in 1992 when Carlos Jauregui organized and led the first LGBT Pride Parade in Buenos Aires, which at that time attracted only 300 people. And you know what? The curiosity was that those 300 people were masked to hide their identity out of fear of being identified. Today, Pride Parade caters more than 100,000 people and became the most important public event in the LGBT community. Thanks to the endless effort made for more than 20 years in LGBT organizations, in 2010, the same-sex marriage law was sanctioned in Argentina, and this law not only modified the civil marriage regulations to equal marriage regardless their sexual orientation or gender, it also considers including social securities, rights of legacy, adoptions, and joint registration of the kids born under this specific law. Argentina was the first Latin American country to recognize this right, and this constitutes a major progress to establish legal equality for those who wish to get married, and also this law allows promotion of a more justice society. Only 2 years later, the gender identity law was sanctioned and allowed transgender people to be treated according to their self-perceived identity, and to modify their personal data in the National Register by changing the register name, the image, and the gender. And also ordered that all medical treatment for transitioning should be included in the compulsory medical programs, which guarantee coverage by practices throughout both any kind of system, the public or the private one. Argentina is the only country which has law that allow people to change their gender identity without facing barriers such as psychiatric diagnosis that label them as abnormality. It was in 2015, the World Health Organization cited Argentina as an exemplary country for providing transgender rights. However, the LGBT community, and especially trans people, are still struggling several violent situations. Last year, records were alarming and ascending. There were a total of 177 murders. Out of 113 were trans women, 42 gay men, 15 to lesbian, and 7 to trans men. The trans women are the most affected one. One of the reasons why this happened is because the lack of acceptance in the society, starting for their nest, where in most of the cases need to live to be themselves, and it's concatenated with other exclusion or discrimination facts like the school, and consequently less opportunities to access to a formal employment, health, formal loans, just to mention a few things that they can access. Society acceptance is still one of the fights that Argentina is dealing with, even more in some provinces where biases and religions are powerful, have a powerful role in their communities. So I think that now it's time to cover Brazil. So I leave you with Felipe. Felipe, it's your turn to explain about Brazil's situation nowadays.
Hi guys, sorry, I was just putting the proper slides. So I'm Felipe. I'm going to talk a little bit about Brazil. I think one important picture to be made here is that every right that the LGBT community gained throughout the years was through the judiciary system. So there's no actual law that protects the rights of the LGBT plus community in Brazil today. They are all judiciary decisions that now can be made for the rest of the community. So for example, we have since 2004, same-sex unions allowed in Brazil, and same-sex marriage only since 2013. All decisions ruled by the Brazil Supreme Court. Also in 2018, in March, the Brazil Supreme Court recognized the change of name and gender marker, regardless of surgery or hormone treatments, which was a really gain for the community. Not in such good news when talking about violence here in Brazil. There is a group called Gay Group of Bahia that tracks some KPIs related to that. And in 2019, for example, they said that every 23 hours, an LGBT plus person was either murdered or suicidal in Brazil. However, when we think about gay pride, so like the gay pride started in 1997, and it only changed its name to LGBT Pride in 2008. JPMorgan joined the Pride since 2017, together with a group of companies from the financial market called Outstand. And since then, we hold a brunch every morning prior to the LGBT Pride Parade of São Paulo, with all these companies showing our support to the cause. Silvana, I think we can.
Sure, thank you. Maybe we can move to the last but not least Latin America country from our panel. Remember to leave us your question in the Padlor. In the poll section, you can leave the question there before moving to Eli. Eli, it's your turn to cover Peru, and tell us why you are covering Peru.
Muchas gracias, Silvana. Thank you so much, team, for allowing me to participate in today's session. So as to the why I am covering Peru, I was born and raised in Peru. I moved to the US at age 18, so I migrated, for many reasons, chief among them, perhaps because I wanted to live my true self, live as my true self. And so I migrated to the US. I, however, visit Peru often because my family and friends are still in Peru. And I also, sort of follow Peru's progress or lack thereof with this community. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes to tell you, to display Peru as an example of a country in Latin America that still has not progressed as much as some of our counterparts. As Silvana very eloquently explained, Argentina is probably the example to follow in South America. So briefly, I'll go over some stats, but just another reminder, please submit your questions via the polls feature in the Pathable account. So in Peru, some basics, the same-sex marriage is not currently permitted or recognized legally in Peru. Peru is a country where we have a very strong religious influence. The administration actually has a religious individual or counselor as part of their advisory team. So any law or any new recommendation is sort of vetted by this religious scholar. And so as you would understand, some of these advances that other countries have had have not passed because of the opposition of the religious organizations in Peru. And so same-sex marriage has not been permitted and is not currently permitted. Civil unions are also not permitted. There are individual regulations in terms of designating someone as a primary next of kin or for retirement accounts, but as a blanket, there has not been any recognition of civil unions. I think we have the first question. So we're going to, let me just kind of go through this and then we'll take that question. Gender identity. And this is very near and dear to my heart, of course, as it personally affects me as a Peruvian citizen. Legal gender markers changes or changes to a legal name are not permitted currently in Peru. I know that we transgender people in Peru have wanted to do this to be legally recognized and access certain benefits in the gender in which we identify, and it has not been possible. The current system allows for a legal proceeding if someone wants to change their name, not the gender marker, but the name, for personal reasons other than errors. However, those legal proceedings are costly. And because of the expense, the majority of transgender people in Peru are not able to afford this legal proceeding. There isn't a process just for any citizen to go through through the legal name change processes there is in many states in the United States. And so it makes it very difficult, so that I believe only a handful of Peruvian citizens have been able to change their name, and still not their gender marker, but their name in their legal documents. The third point is probably the most difficult to discuss for me, but violence against the community is rampant. And I think the one of the reasons, the underlying reasons for the level of violence, especially against the transgender community, is due to the societal view of transgender people. I think the Peruvian citizens, as well as the Peruvian leaders, lack the language to explain, the transgender community. They lack the information, the education. They lack the awareness of this community, and so often transgender people are sort of mixed in with the LGBT community as gay men or gay women, again, because of the lack of understanding. And so, for example, they wouldn't see me as a woman, legally or otherwise, in Peru. They would see me as a gay man. And so, unfortunately, that is a reality for many Peruvians. And so I think that is a driving factor in our violence or our crime rates against the LGBT community. In 2010, the human rights situation of Lima's organization reported that the trans community had 100% vulnerability when exposed to our police force. So in many situations, we have the local police and something that we call Serenasco, which is our one of the main vendors for police, is outsourced in Lima, arbitrarily stop transgender women specifically for no other reason than the fact that many of these trans women didn't have what we call passing privilege, and so they were harassed and in many cases given bogus crimes. And so it ended. These many situations have resulted in, as you can see, all of the surveyed transgender people experiencing injustice, but as well as discrimination from the police force. And so the LGBTQ organizations that exist, the ONGs that exist in Peru, are trying to combat that, but it's so systemic that it makes it difficult for the community to live out of the closet. So one of the things that I know is, although in its infancy, many of these organizations are partnering with private companies such as JPMorgan Chase and others that have presence in Peru, in order to not only support this community, but also influence the passing of laws and influence the local leaders, to hopefully change this pattern. And we've seen some traction from the private sector, whereas in the public sector, there's absolutely no protections. Recently, in the past few months, I have seen a lot more Zoom meetings, sensitivity trainings, etc. As I said, in these private organizations that have been very helpful, because ultimately they're reaching the educated or employed Peruvians and they're learning about the LGBT community, the language, inclusive language, etc. But again, there's millions of Peruvians that are still not being touched, as they're not part of corporate organizations, or they don't see this in TV. Now, I will say, again, being a lot of these efforts being in its infancy, the first LGBT Pride Parade in Lima was in 2002. I think it was the last one in South America to occur, but it has occurred and it's growing. I think one of the hopes that I have is by, as I follow social media, there's a lot of younger generations that are much more active in the Pride Parades. Pride Parades started as a very small group when I was young, I graduated high school in 2001, so I never saw a pride parade, but when I came back to Peru, I heard of some of them. And now I see social media, the last pride parade, not this year, but last year in 2019, was remarkably bigger than I have ever seen. And I think part of it is social media, right? And so this is a counteract to the oppressive administration or environment that we have in Peru, and it's nice to see that we're sort of rebelling, and not just LGBT people, but allies of the community in Peru, and that are so important. I myself, I graduated from and I think we'll go into the individual perspectives in a little bit, but I myself graduated from a all-male Catholic school, and so all my 120 plus people that graduated with me in my class have become, or not, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them have become allies to myself, to the LGBT community, because the exposure that they've had to a transgender person such as myself. So I thank you with this for the time that you've given me, and I think I'll pass it back to Silvana.
Thank you, Ellie. Yes, I'm just multitasking between my two screens because I saw a lot of questions are coming to us. But first of all, let me tell you to all of our audience that we are very happy with this Paddler environment, because we can leave you a summary of the information that we all prepared for you. If you take a look into the files, it's near with you are leaving the question in the poll section. You may find this wonderful and impactful information with the representation of our 4 countries, with the status so far about the parade, the same-sex marriage, the gender identity, and the violence against the community. That was a resource that we created internally in our firms as a takeaway for you for these sessions, so you can load it and keep it with us, because it's current, and we create just for this panel. I don't want to cover too much because we have our panelists here to explain better. And I want to start with Felipe. I have a lot of questions. I'm super surprised with the number of questions that I have. I think that we covered some of them, but before I starting with the question from our panel, I will ask Felipe, maybe I can start with you first. Tell us what was the main challenge for LGBT plus community is facing nowadays in Brazil, most specifically in Brazil?
Yeah, so I think we've been having challenges since the last election, the presidential election. So we are today in a political environment where there's a lot of pressure against the rights of the LGBT community. However, when you think about the corporate section of the country, the companies and the NGOs have come together to fight for the LGBT rights. So prior to the election 2 years ago, 35 companies and nonprofit organizations, together with Aurenico and led by JPMorgan, signed a letter to all the presidential candidates, telling them that they supported the LGBT rights. Doesn't matter which candidate won. So I think there was a really important mark that we had in the corporate section here in Brazil before the elections. And I think since then, the companies have done an extra amount of job to make us feel safe and comfortable to who we are, because they support us no matter what.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I have here a question from our panel that it's just for Antonio. And it's for Antonio, what is your opinion on the way most of LG community still discriminates against trans and bi people, and whitewashing the expectation of why gay experience discriminates also BIPOC people, or those who doesn't fit in the white wage image? Well, it say HBA status, weight, body build, economic status, lifestyle, geolocation, age, here in Mexico. So it seems that someone from Mexico is asking for you this specific question.
So from the Mexico perspective, in my opinion, the key is education. I mean, as you mentioned, we have an intersectionality, and here in Mexico, we're not all white people; we're most brown-skinned people. But also, we have this stereotype that, and this truth, and these statistics that white people maybe can get better jobs than brown-skinned people. That's something that is true. Plus, if you live with HIV, that's also another point. And if you put this intersectionality, now these white people with HIV or these brown-skinned people with HIV, the white people will have better opportunities. If you're a male or a woman, the male will have better opportunities. In Mexico, the statistic says that straight, cisgender, male, white person, white man, will have a better opportunities than whatever else. And even if you are gay, if you're white but you're gay, you have less opportunities. Even if you're white but you live with HIV, you have less opportunities. And this is because of the lack of education. This is something really, really important, and something that here in JPMorgan, we take it seriously, because we believe that education is the key for solving most of the problems, maybe not all, but at least for making more conscious people. Here we have something called gay educations that we do with our co-workers in order to educate people about everything, about HIV, about trans community, about queer people, about whatever that comes with our community. And this is really important because, for example, nowadays there's a law proposal called Parental PIN. This law proposal came from Spain, from a very conservative party. This proposal is a proposal for education reform, and it says that it is the right for the parents to educate their kids as they want in terms of sexual, reproductive, and gender education. And with this proposal, now parents have to give, or they will give permission, because this is only a proposal, but the parents need to give permission to the school so their children can have education regarding sexual, reproductive, and gender education. This is very warning because it's not only gender education. I mean, the spectrum of the LGBT community, it's also regarding reproductive rights, and it matters to women and to be to have the power of their own bodies. The thing here is that maybe if this proposal is approved, okay, now this parent decide not to educate their children, but then who's gonna do it? Because this has a lot of religious context, and that's something that it's a really big issue here in Mexico, the education. If our youth could choose with their gender, with their reproductive and sexual rights, if they know they have all this spectrum, if they are well educated, they can realize that, as we all know, that the LGBTQ is just a label, and we're more than just one label. And because I'm gay, or I live with HIV, or I'm a drag queen because I am, or I'm a queer guy because I am, it doesn't have anything to do with my performance in what I do. I'm in finance, and I'm not more productive because I'm gay, but I'm more productive because I feel respected, I feel comfortable, and I feel valued in JPMorgan.
Silvana, may I add just a couple of thoughts here, Silvana?
Yes, and I will tell you that I have a lot of questions for Peru, so I think that you will have to cover next.
Okay, great, thank you. The only thing I would like to add regarding the last question was that, you know, the conversation about race is so timely, but in Peru, although, you know, the conversation about race is interpreted a little bit differently, there certainly is the phenomenon of colorism. So colorism exists, I think, in all of Latin America, but in Peru specifically, we have this societal maybe believe that cholos or anyone of darker skin are less for whatever reason, and so the result of that is lack of access to education, lack of access to employment, and so there is a real impact due to this, due to this phenomenon of colorism, and in Peru is very known. And I agree with Antonio. Legally, the census in Peru classifies most Peruvians as mestizos. However, the reality is that those who might have a European descent, and as Antonio said, might be men, even though part of the community, so a gay, not white, but a gay light-skinned male might have better access to employment than someone who's not, someone who's who's a transgender person, who's darker skin. So, this is very much seen if you, when I go back to Peru, I see it very clearly. Those that are in certain positions in banking, I go to certain, I've gone to branches just to open an account, and I see everyone looks white, even though we're not, but everyone looks white. And so it's very apparent. However, there's also statistics to support that. So it's very true that there's more disadvantages within this intersectionality of colorism. So I think you have more questions for me, Silvana.
Yes, exactly. I will tell you that, well, there are people asking for NGO lists of NGO lists in Peru for helping with LGBT communities. Maybe we can reach out later with more details. But for example, there will be more question here saying, Elizabeth, I'm Peruvian. I haven't seen much progress regarding legislation supporting LGBT community and equality in society and at the workplace. Are there any projects that we can work on to help improve these areas? Always thinking HRC and reaching out to LATAM.
Yes, absolutely. So there's one that comes to mind. I recently participated in a panel, I think I alluded to that earlier, with a few different organizations in Peru. We had a Zoom meeting and we talked about the LGBT experience in the workplace. In Peru, they're called ONGs, Organización No Gubernamentales, and they're the equivalent to non-for-profit organizations in the US. And there's one that comes to mind that participated in this panel. Pride Connection is the name of that Peruvian organization. So Pride Connection, similar to, I think, something that Felipe and Antonio alluded to in their own countries, Pride Connection is an organization of employees of corporations within Peru that are looking to provide education, awareness, information to their employees. And although it doesn't hit everyone, as I mentioned, not everyone is employed in a large corporation, it definitely has had an impact in the understanding of some of my peers that graduated high school with me that are now employed with Netflix, JPMorgan, etc. That are in that society. And now I understand what transgender means. Now I understand what the experience of an LGBT person is. And so, I would say that comes to mind, the Pride Connection. There are a couple more that specifically help the transgender community, but in my experience, they're more geared towards providing basic access to food, basic access to a shelter. Some of the transgender women that I've seen participate in these organizations in Peru need somewhere to sleep, need something to eat, and so and unfortunately they resort to what we call survival work, and so those are the organizations that I know. But as far as education and information, Pride Connection is the one that comes to mind.
Thank you, Eli. I have more questions here, but I want to cover a few more and then continue. And I will spare 5 minutes to read more questions that we have from our audience. Because now I want to turn into more personal question for you today. In your case, Felipe, how was your coming out in the company? in JPMorgan, most specifically?
Yeah, so when I came to JPMorgan, I had a relative that worked for the company before. She was very pro-diversity, and she used to talk a lot about in panels about it, and she always used me as an example. So actually, when I came to JPMorgan, I was already out. I didn't have much of a chance. But I think what's important to highlight here is that that never made any difference in the company and how I was evaluated. Maybe being gay even helped me go some places that I wouldn't have gone if I wasn't part of a BRG or if I wasn't part of a minoritized group. So it's not that fun, my coming out story. My aunt took me out before I came in.
Okay. Thank you. And in your case, Eli, how was, coming out in this firm, in JPMorgan?
Yeah, so I joined the firm at JPMorgan Chase before my gender transitions. And of course, I was here in the US already. I personally, had what many refer to as a success story because when I transitioned, it was, pre-Caitlyn Jenner. It was pre this huge dialogue, global dialogue about the transgender community. And so the awareness or the exposure that many of my colleagues in Florida, where I reside, had to the transgender community was minimal, if none, if any at all. So I, in a lot of cases, was the first transgender person that my colleagues ever met or heard of. And so my experience could have been not a success story, but the opposite. But thankfully, because of the support of our many inclusive policies that we have at JPMorgan Chase, but also I really truly believe that the culture that is that we are held accountable to, right? The inclusive culture allowed me to be my true self in the office. My personal experience, and I have to recognize this. I think this is one of the uncomfortable conversations we must have. But my personal experience might have been a little bit better, also because of the privileges that I might enjoy that others might not. One of which is something that we call in the community passing privilege. And so when I transitioned, I passed as the gender that I identify as. And so I recognize not all transgender women enjoy that privilege. And so I have dedicated my life to, or at least my free time to give back to the community and understand and give education, participate in panels such as this one. But I certainly, had minimal to no issues with my coming out at Chase. Having said that, I joined Chase as a very feminine man. And so when I came out, I think it was expected, even though it might have not been fully understood, it was expected that I will be making a change because I look like this already. So, again, it might be a unique case. I have met other people, not at JPMorgan Chase, but out in other firms whose experience was different, was more problematic, encountered more hurdles. And so I cannot say this is the standard in the US. Many people from Peru ask me, this must be because you live in the US. The ease of transition must be because you live in the US. And I don't think that's true. I think that is individual. I think that the individual experience of each person is really unique. My experience might not be reflective of all transgender people, and I recognize that. However, I do say that there is the part of the experience is the support, the allies that you have around you. And I was fortunate to have many, not only at work, but outside of work as well.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you so much for your testimony. I'm impressed with your answer, testimonial. Thank you for being yourself today and put you in the spot for, raising part of your life, I will continue because there are some questions related to the inclusive language as well. So I don't want to leave less time to that. We will cover, and we mentioned that the language evolved, and as we can see how much it's changed over the time. In our native language, we also identify some old-fashioned words or newbie words. When we talk about inclusions, we must consider the language as an important resource to actively embrace diversity. So many times certain words or phrasing can exclude person or group, even if it is unintentional. We need to take care and ensure that everyone feels welcome. This means that we need to understand and we need to be mindful of the words and the actions and how they make impact to others. So now Antonio and Felipe will explain us about how Spanish and Portuguese are incorporating the inclusive language. Antonio and Felipe.
Hi everyone. So this is your Spanish lesson for inclusive language. As you know, and Silvana said, language is evolving. I mean, from the first time that humanity put a word in arcilla in a table, it has evolved. It has evolved the shape, the sounds, everything has evolved. So language must evolve and must adequate to the reality that we're living. So Spanish is a language that is very gendered, with its nouns, with its substantives, and its adjectives. For example, in Spanish, the word beautiful, you have the masculine and the feminine. Hermoso will be the masculine and hermosa the feminine. If it ends with an O, it's a masculine. If it ends with an A, it's feminine. That this is an adjective. But for example, a substantive as friend, amigo. Amigo will be masculine because it ends with an O. Amiga, it ends with an A, so it will be feminine. So now that because the non-binary system has always existed, but now it's we are here, we are visible. So many people say, okay, I'm not in the feminine or in the masculine. So where the language is. So that is why we created this inclusive or this gender neutral language, and the ending will be with an E. So for example, beautiful in masculine, hermoso, feminine, hermosa, and neutral will be hermose. Or for example, friend will be amigo as masculine, amiga as feminine, or amigue in a gender neutral. The reality with this language is that we have this academic that is called Real Academia de la Lengua Española, which is the academy that settles all the rules for language. And they say that inclusive language is not part of Spanish language. It's not accepted, but even though that it's not accepted, I use it. And I always tell people that if they feel comfortable with this ending, why don't you use it? It's not hurting anyone, and it will make feel better to everyone or for those who needs it. So this is the gender neutral language in Spanish that even though it's not accepted, we still we use it. I mean, if you're part of the diversity community, it is known that we use it.
Excellent. Shall we go to our Portuguese class in inclusive language?
Yeah, so your Portuguese teacher for today, hi. So very similar to Spanish, I would say that in Portuguese, every word, adjective or substantive has a gender. And also similar to Spanish, the terminations A usually for female, feminine, and O for masculine. Different from Spanish, there have been created a lot of systems to be used in order to include the gender neutral considerations. So we have the L system where you just take the ending of the word. You have the ELO system and the ELO system where you change the ending from E to from A and O to U. And then you have the ELO system, which is the most used system nowadays, which you change the ending of the words to E. So the same examples that we have in Spanish. So beautiful be bonito, bonita, and in the ILE, ite. And for friends, you have amigo, amiga, and in gender neutral, you're gonna have amigue. And I think the important thing is this last system, the ILE system, is also supported by Aurenico. So if you look at the Aurenico website, they have a PDF explaining the gender neutral language considerations for Portuguese that can be downloaded and can be used easily.
Thank you, Felipe. I think that there were some questions related to inclusive language as well. But, you know, language changes as we do. 100 years ago, it was unthinkable to use many foreign words, for example, on a daily basis, as we are using today. For those who are still reluctant to incorporate this kind of inclusive language, it's a good time to reflect. The reason why we are incorporating these changes is because the language is help us to solidarity, acceptance, and including people who are often faced with exclusion and social prejudice. In fact, I have here one of the questions, I'm just reading the panel, that is, well, I have a lot of questions and it's related to a lot of different topics. So I will open the latest 7 minutes to answer the most that we can. I have one, so our panelists can pick up. It's a, do the local governments in your countries view the crimes against LGBT plus Q individual as a hate crimes? Do the local governments in your countries view the crimes against LGBTQ as individuals as a hate crimes?
I'll answer briefly for Peru. Sorry.
Please, come on.
I'll answer briefly for Peru. There is no hate crime statute in the local law in Peru. So any violence against LGBTQ people in Peru are not considered hate crimes.
So for Brazil, the judiciary system also made a decision, if I'm not mistaken, last year, where LGBT phobia is equal to racism. So it is technically seen as a hate crime.
I have another question. Maybe we can go quickly because I have a lot on different topics. The other that I have is how we can better support LGBT community in LATAM with the challenges surrounding gender roles and religion.
I think I
How
could
can better
answer.
support LGBT community? Come on,
I
Antonio.
think the answer is education. I really think that is the key answer. I mean, if you are in your family, whenever you are, if you're with your family, if you are parents with some boys or girls, you can starting teaching them how not to be this gender roles. I mean, it started with this pink and blue to know which gender is the people. It's colors have no gender. So why do you use it? It's just only your biological sex. Why don't you use certain kind of words to your girls? I mean, girls are used to say like, yeah, the princess, the prettiest, the soft. Why don't you use brave? Why don't you use, you can be fast, you can be empowering your youth, making boys taking responsibility of housework. And because that's not something that women must do. I mean, a human can do it because it's not something that only one gender has to do. I mean, if you have a boy, he can do the laundry, he can do the dishes, he can cook. If you have a girl, he can go to soccer. It starts in your family, or you can go even in your workplace. You can join these VRGs, these ERGs. You can do these sessions. There's a lot of things to do, but I think everything goes to education.
Thank you, Antonio. And connecting what you are saying, and there is another question that I want to raise here is, what can corporations made in US with offices in LATAM do help out the LGBT community within LATAM? How can corporation based in US with offices in LATAM to help out to the LGBT community in Latin America?
I think that what we're doing today is an example of how we can reach those communities in LATAM. We are all employed by JPMorgan Chase with presence in all regions, but we are focusing on the experience of those in Latin America. Other companies, as I mentioned earlier, other companies are starting to do that. Companies that are based in the US with presence in Latin America. I think to continue with that practice and include Latin American, or at least have the conversation about, does this training make sense in Latin America? Should we adapt the training, make it in Spanish, change based on certain nuances, but nevertheless have training and conversations and dialogue in those, those regions is important. So.
Thank you. I have another question. Could you give us some advice regarding how we improve the impact of our ERG, what we call usually VRG as well, within LATAM, most specifically with LATAM?
I could say that because I'm based in Mexico, and we have these meetings, these monthly meetings for Pride chapters all around LATAM. So we share our practices, or what projects have gone well, what can we do. For example, one thing that we did is wine tasting. And the focus of this wine tasting was regarding LGBT community. So these gender roles, it's also for wine. I mean, red wine, it's for men, white, pink wine, it's for women. And we did this mix of wine, Mexican wines, with this educational non-gender taste. So you can start doing some activities and share it with other companies and share it with other locations to see what have been success for them and what you can apply and tropicalize to your own country.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. There are also some questions related to, well, what is the path to follow? For example, in Peru, what can do as company to build a better policy? I'm not referring specifically to Peru, I will refer overall, because I think that it's interesting to mention that we are all, as we say, part of JPMorgan, and we are proud to say that first of all, we have a statement that is very important to us, which is our code of conduct that is against any kind of discrimination, starting for them and then continue to other initiatives, guidelines, and different activities that we have. Internally in our firm, we have, for example, the LGBT toolkit that inform or give us some resource to all of our employees in terms of terminology, news, different organizations that help us with LGBT community all over the world. We also have a transgender awareness training, a transgender travel guide to avoid conflicts to traveling to country that doesn't allow or have homophobic issues so far. We also have LGBT self-ID that invites employee to fill some answer or respond some answers to identify LGBT plus employee and who of them are come out in the office to measure the percentage of population that we have at this moment and we need to work with. And we also have a pronouns campaign because we really embrace that presenting us and introducing us with our pronouns allows to, for example, non-binary people to feel more comfortable in the way that we reach to them. So we just share this example from our company to implement in other companies. It's not from one day to other. We know that it's a long way and there is a lot of work around that, but that is the human way that we, with our folk, want to share to all of us the way that we are living inclusion in our firm. So saying that, I'm going to close this panel. I want that all my colleagues will say goodbye and thank you so much for to you to share with us all your testimonial. it's up to you to say goodbye to our audience.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session and for sharing some really good questions with us. Have a great afternoon.
Muchísimas gracias, and I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you guys for joining today. If we didn't answer your questions, contact us on Affable or on our social medias. Bye.
Muchas gracias a todos. Buenas tardes.